New viewership data has been revealed for The Acolyte, and it is the second week in a row that viewership has significantly declined. It's not going to get any better for this show. But before we get to this, I'd like to ask you please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel, please consider hitting that join button and becoming a member. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com, and we have new viewership data from analytics firm Illuminate. As reported by Variety, viewership for The Acolyte declined to 232.2 million minutes watched for the week the show's fifth episode debuted. That's a decline of 11% from the previous week, which had a total of 262 million minutes watched. Of note, the runtime for both the fourth and fifth episodes are nearly identical. The fourth episode has a runtime of 34 minutes and 2 seconds, while the fifth episode's runtime is 34 minutes and 5 seconds. So, with almost identical runtimes, it is a huge decline there, 11%. Very kind of apples to apples as it gets. Obviously, there are other factors that could go into this because usually these data companies like Nielsen, like Illuminate, what they do is they don't actually track that specific episode. They track all view time for the entire show in that week. So if someone happens to watch the first episode in the week that the fifth episode debuts, it is tracking that data for the fifth week, even if it is the first episode. But I think this is almost as accurate a comparison as we're going to get because the runtimes are so identical and we're seeing 11% decline from the previous week. People are tuning out of the show. And if you recall, even from that last week, from the third episode to the fourth episode, we saw a huge decline because the third episode was the highest viewed episode. Obviously, there was a lot of online discussion about this episode. Are they going to make the Force woke? The lesbian space witches, all of this stuff. And indeed, we did see the lesbian space witches. They did not make the Force necessarily female, but they created an alternative to it, which might even be worse, called the Thread, which is manipulated by these lesbian space witches. And then these lesbian space witches were able to create life through the thread, basically something that only the Force does itself. And so these witches were able to do it through their thing that they call the thread. And so that viewership hit to 380.5 million. I think a lot of, because people wanted to know, is this really that bad? They wanted to watch the train wreck. They wanted to kind of maybe see for themselves. But even as we'll get to this is still awful, absolutely terrible. And then obviously the least viewed week was actually the show's premiere week, where you had 2 episodes. So you had almost the longest amount of runtime available with the 2 episodes, and it only brought in 210 million minutes. So you might have actually had some bleed over maybe in that 380.5 million that third week, or excuse me, that second week, third episode. There might have been some bleed over there as well. Maybe people hadn't watched all of the first 2 episodes or hadn't watched any, so they decided to watch all 3 episodes in that second week, ballooning that number, which has now significantly come down by over, what are we looking at, 380.5 million, and now we're down to 232.2 million. So that is a 150 million decline, or right around there. So massive decline from this show after its second week high. This actually does, these viewership numbers do kind of reflect what we're seeing in total reviews. If you look at IMDb, the first episode received 20,000 reviews. The second episode had over 18,000, which means there probably was some drop off between the first and second. People decided not to watch the second one after watching the first one. They had enough. The third episode then did go back up to 20,000. However, the fourth episode declined down to 11,000 reviews. Huge decline there. And then the fifth episode only has 8,400 reviews right now. Obviously, just came out, so you might see didn't just come out, but came out on Tuesday. It's the most recent one. So you might see a little bit more reviews, but it's still a lot lower than the fourth episode there by quite a bit. Over 2,500 reviews there difference. So let's kind of compare this to kind of provide some color, some perspective. Compare this to Ahsoka, which aired just last year. That show's 2-episode premiere brought in 829 million minutes, as reported by Nielsen. That compared to the Acolyte's 210 million, as reported by Illuminate. That's insane. We also have the second week, third episode for both shows. Ahsoka did 487 million minutes, and while it declined obviously significantly from its first week, and the Acolyte increased to 380.5 million. It's Ahsoka still had over 100 million minutes watched more than the Acolyte. So even though it declined and Acolyte went up, Ahsoka still did better overall. That's how terrible this show is. Its best performing week is still off by over 100 million minutes compared to the second episode of Ahsoka that had a significant decline. So Ahsoka's fourth episode would fall again to 459 million minutes, but then we saw the Acolyte decline to 262 million minutes, and then for this fifth episode, Ahsoka actually kind of went up in its fifth episode to 577 million minutes compared to the Acolyte's 232.2 million minutes. That is a difference of 59.7%. It's a 59.7% decline from that 577 million minutes to the 232.2 million for the Acolyte. That is absolutely enormous. This show allegedly cost $180 million to make, according to the New York Times. We've got reports in Forbes that it was around $50 million just in the pre-production. They completely are just burning money here. This show, these Disney Plus shows on Star Wars are not making the Walt Disney Company any money. They're not making investors any money. And as Valiant Renegade has said repeatedly, these shows should be scrapped because all they're doing is they are actively harming the brand, both Star Wars and Marvel, because those are like the two biggest properties where we've seen massive declines on Disney Plus, despite having more subscribers. Looking at Echo, when you look at the Marvel stuff, I think it's like 720 million minutes watched for all whatever 5 episodes that Echo had. That's the same as the Loki season 1, episode 1 premiere like 2 years ago in 2022 when it came out. That's how atrocious they've destroyed these brands. They're literally just destroying the brand. They're decreasing the value of Star Wars and Marvel with these shows, and they should stop doing it and stop spending all of this money that they could potentially reallocate somewhere else, or they could maybe make some money. But that would make financial sense, and the Walt Disney Company doesn't seem to do that. So I don't think any viewership is going to increase. I don't think there's going to be any increase in viewership here. We've got obviously these atrocious audience scores, 14% on Rotten Tomatoes, average rating of 1.2 out of 5 stars over there. IMDb is a 3.4 weighted score. The unweighted mean is 3.0, and the majority of all reviews, 57.6%, are 1 out of 10. People do not like this show. At least the people that have seemingly have reviewed it do not like it. And one would assume that because they're liking it, their dislike of this show is so vehement, they stopped watching too. And I think that's reflected in those reviews, the number of reviews we looked at earlier, especially on IMDb. So I don't think this show is going anywhere. Audience scores are very telling on this. And the only way it might have an increase is if you have like kind of like a binge episode where the show ends, it airs all of its 8 episodes. People kind of maybe sub up to Disney Plus to watch all of it, or they're already subbed. They watch all of it in one go. So you might see a slight bump in the season finale because you're getting all of the watch time for the entire season going to that season finale week, right? And that might be why you might see watch time, minutes watched increase there. But this show just kind of is just killing Star Wars. It is destroying more of the brand. It is the worst performing Star Wars show on Disney Plus based on the minutes watched and all of that stuff. And it just continues the trend of these Star Wars shows losing audience, losing viewership, minutes watched declining. And I'm here for it. I'm here for it. This stuff is garbage. It's propaganda. It's trying to destroy people's minds, destroy their souls. The stuff that it's pushing. And the less people watching it, the better. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.